This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 36.
The students need to feel um, um, to have a sense of significance, and I think that's huge. I think it's really important to have the mutual respect for your students, and give them an opportunity to have some meaningful experience in your classroom and have some significance.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
What's up, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here without my co-host, Mr. Matt, the Family Man Rogers, once again. Matt will be back with our next show, but for today, we had an incredible interview with an educator from Saudi Arabia, relocated from Houston, Texas, Jorge Rodriguez, and the conversation was fantastic. The insight that he brought was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. It was really interesting to learn from him, to hear about why he moved, the opportunity that he got to become an international teacher, the way things operate there, how it's the same, how it's different, and then really diving into the way he runs his classroom as a elementary physical education teacher. He talks a lot about different instructional strategies. We talk a lot about student choice, student advocacy, and how to run a democratic classroom. And Jorge really gives great answers on tough questions. It's usually very difficult for teachers to talk about how you tackle a more democratic student-led classroom, and he really gives some specific strategies that any classroom teacher would be able to use. And he also really talks about relationships. And we've heard before, we hear so many times about the importance of a positive relationship between the student and the teacher, but he again gives some really great ideas for exactly how you can accomplish that as an educator. So Jorge's got a lot of experience. He's talked with a lot of teachers. He hosts his own podcast that he mentions and that we have linked up in our show notes. Our show notes can be found at poweredup.com/show36. All the information can be found there, his podcast, his social media handles, and everything that he shares with us today in this interview. So, as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, please subscribe wherever you're listening or watching us, and please share this with as many educators as you can so we can get these great conversations out to larger audiences. So, without any further delay, let's jump into our interview with Jorge Rodriguez. Hi, Jorge. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to dig into conversation with you today. So please officially introduce yourself, where you're coming from, and just kind of what your journey in education has looked like for you.
Sure. My name is Jorge Rodriguez, and I am a physical education teacher in Saudi Arabia. Next year, I'm actually going to be taking on a new role. I'm going to be an elementary physical education teacher and the elementary activities coordinator for the school here in Kaust. So what we do here is I work at a school that is basically the school connected to a university here in Saudi Arabia, and the university is King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. So basically the school system is kind of caters to the compound that we live on. So there's a university with professors and all the staff that work there, and their kids are the kids that we teach. And so this compound kind of is centered around that university, and that's what I do here. Before that, I lived in Houston, Texas, and I was a elementary physical education teacher there. And before that, I'm originally from McAllen, Texas, which is way down south, right next to Mexico.
Very interesting. I mean, I will I will say I think our audience is going to be pretty shocked to hear that you're coming from Saudi Arabia, and I'm really excited to just learn more about that experience, learn more about what school looks like there, and how we can, perhaps bring some of that back to where I'm teaching and wherever our other teachers are coming from. So what would you say first tell us about, how did that move happen? Why did it happen? And what was like instead of asking what was the most surprising thing to you, what was like a subtle difference or a subtle thing that you weren't expecting that you feel has a big impact or positive impact on your position?
Okay, so first of all, how it kind of got started. I was a elementary physical education teacher for about like 14 years in Houston, Texas. And we had made a pretty good life for ourselves there in Houston. My wife is a teacher as well. She's a chemistry teacher, and she was teaching at the high school level. She was coaching volleyball. I was doing my thing, and we had a nice little house there. We got 2 kids, and we were doing pretty well, and we were enjoying life. And I also have a podcast called the Global Phys Ed Voxcast, and I like to talk to teachers from all over the world. And so I think the first time I really thought about international teaching was when I had a podcast with a few other international PE teachers, and they were telling their stories, and they were telling how sort of fortunate they were to be able to see the world and travel around the world. And I think that's when I first started getting that little itch, to kind of get out of my bubble. And I started kind of realizing that everything that I know and everything that I do comes from that perspective of living in Houston, Texas, living in Texas my whole life, living in that small community. And it was like, there's so much more out there, that I don't know about. And there's so much I don't know that I don't know. And I want to experience those things. And so I would say maybe a couple years later, a friend of mine, Andy Vasily, who you should have on the show. He's great, by the way.
Yeah, I'd love to.
He's actually now my pedagogical coordinator. But a friend of mine, Andy Vasily, he had been at several other international schools, and he was in Saudi Arabia. He had been there. He had been in Saudi Arabia for about 3 years or so, and a teaching position came up, a PE teaching position. And sort of out of the blue, he contacted me and he said, "Hey, have you ever thought about teaching in Saudi Arabia?" And of course, I was like, "No way! I'm not leaving Texas. This is it for me. I'm gonna do my whole career here. I'm gonna die here. This is where I'm at." And he kept kind of leaving me messages. Just check out the package. Check out this. These are the advantages. Check out the compound. And the more I kind of thought about it, the more I thought, well, why not? Why not try it out and see what it's like? And if we hate it, we come back. It's no big deal. And so I approached my wife about it, and she'd been teaching at the same school in the same position for her whole career. Right out of college, she became a teacher, so she's been teaching longer than I have. And she was like, "No, there's no way. We're not doing this." And I was like, just think about it, check this out. It's a cool place, it's great people over there. We talked to Andy a couple times on Skype, met a couple people, and we thought, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. So I threw my name in the hat, got an interview, got the second interview, got offered the job. We took it, and now 3 years later, it looks like we're going to be here for at least another few years. So we're happy. We've been able to travel around the world. I mean, COVID kind of stopped that whole thing from happening for the last year and a half or so. But before that, I mean, we were able to see. I think my first year here, I went to like 10 different countries. I mean,
Wow.
It's just absolutely amazing. And we've been able to meet people from all over the world. Our kids I have a son who's 15, my daughter's 13, and they've been able to see some amazing things. They've met friends from all over the world. They've in an international school, students kind of come and go, people kind of come and go, families do. and they've been able to meet people and stay in contact with people from all over the world. So it's kind of cool, you know. They're getting a really interesting experience and interesting perspective, and I think that is the thing that has been most eye-opening for me. I was expecting to go to a different country and kind of, you know, hopefully be a little bit more open-minded and to see things through a different perspective. And that has definitely happened. And it's especially in Saudi Arabia, like there is a huge cultural change, right? And you have to sort of be open-minded to accept those changes. And that I think has been the biggest thing for me is kind of embracing that change and embracing that different perspective.
Right. That's amazing. I would think your kids are really benefiting the most from the experience, just in terms of the age that they're at and the like you're saying, the experiences that they're able to gain. And I'm gonna have to ask you for some tips on your husband negotiation skills, because I struggle to get my wife to consider moving into a house that might need a little rehab work while we live there. And you got your wife to move halfway across the world, so that's pretty impressive. But so what's school like there? How is it the same? How is it different? What do you like most about teaching in your new school after you were in the school you were at in Houston for so long?
Yeah, well, what's funny is the last 3 years I've been a kindergarten PE teacher, and that was kind of a big change for me, because you know I had taught, you know, my whole career I'd taught K through 5, but kinder is difficult. You know, they're tough, and I used to get
We had a guest on our show who I believe you've spent some time with, Kyle Bragg. Yeah, he's a PE
awesome.
teacher in Arizona, and I loved how he described kindergartners as people that have been alive for 60 months, which is exactly. A good way to put a perspective around how little time they've spent on Earth. Sorry,
yeah, that's
continue.
Right. And they don't have the experience, you know, and they're a ball of energy, you know. They're endless curiosity, endless energy, and it's great and it's a lot of fun. But they, you know, I mean, everybody who's been a teacher, there's sometimes you just don't have the patience for that, you know. There's every now and then it's just like, oh, and this adult mindset kicks in, and it's like, I can't do this. I can't just play all day long. But you know what? That was another kind of like eye-opening experience for me, is to like change my mindset and change the way I saw these little young learners, you know, and that has really opened up a lot of like freed me up a little bit more, you know, to be a little bit more playful and to see through the eyes of my students, more so, because I've always been, you know, I've always tried to run a very student-centered classroom, and a very sort of constructivist classroom, and like I said, sometimes it's difficult if you have the range in a whole day, right? So if you see kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth in one day, it's difficult to kind of switch from one to the other. So now I'm focusing on one grade level. Well, I was focusing on this one grade level, and I could really dig deep, and I could really figure out like what's really developmentally appropriate for these students. And I can get down to their level, and I could like start seeing things through the eyes of a 5 or 6 year old, you know. And that was big for me. That was like an exercise in perspective and open-mindedness that I really needed at this point in my career. And so next year, you know, I'm back in elementary, and I'm going to be teaching 4th and 5th grade, and then, like I said, the activities coordinator. And I'm hoping to be able to take that perspective and be even more, you know, of a student-centered teacher, and really take into account, you know, what my students are feeling, what they're thinking, and what they're you know, trying to give them these opportunities for meaningful experiences in PE. So yeah, that was that was sort of a challenge, and I didn't actually answer your question. The school here it's interesting because we have three different campuses. So there's a kindergarten campus that's just K1 through K3. There's an elementary campus that's kind of connected to the high school campus. So the elementary is 1 through 5, and then the high school campus. There's a secondary campus is 6 through 12. And typically what happens here, because it's a university that has a lot of like postdoctorate students, there's a lot of really young students. There's a lot of kindergartners, and then the numbers kind of fall off as they get older. So, for instance, the graduating class last year, I think, was like 30 students, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Whereas the kindergarten building has, I don't know, 400 students or something. So it's pretty big, and then it kind of dwindles off as people move and so forth. There's a lot of young families here. So yeah, we're an IB school, and I think there's something like 85 different countries that are represented from K through 12 in our school. So it's very diverse, and there's people from literally all over the world.
That's very interesting. So speaking of this idea of families coming and going, so we've had a lot of conversations where, a common thread that we see is the community of the school, the surrounding community that the school is involved in is so important. And we've had a few guests that relocated to the position that they're in, so they're from a completely different state and culture, and talking about how important it was to learn that local community, learn that local culture. So how does your school maintain a high quality or a tight knit culture and community when there's so much families coming in and out? What do you see that your school does to kind of maintain that strong community?
Well, honestly, that's one of the things that they are trying to do more of, and that's kind of the reason why I'm going to be doing the activities coordinating position next year, so that we can start building that a little bit more in the elementary level. But one of the things that the university does, or the whole compound actually, one of the things that they do so well is that they do have a lot of activities that the organization, the community life organization, runs and facilitates for the families. And so, outside of school, this compound, it's a pretty big compound, and it has a lot of amenities. There's a golf course. There's 3 different gyms. There's a racquetball center. There's a couple swimming pools that are community pools. We have a little private beach. So there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of activities that go on around the community that help kind of build that sense of community. Obviously there's always stuff that you could do that can help that out and do a little bit more. But there's playgrounds everywhere. You see kids playing everywhere. It's pretty hot right now, but as soon as it starts cooling down a little bit, kids and families are riding their bikes together. There's exercise groups. There's all kinds of clubs that you can join. I played community basketball the last few years. There's a volleyball group that gets together. You name it. There's a frisbee golf course that me and my friends go out and play every now and then. And so there's a lot of things that you could do. And like I said, that's one of the things that the university and the community does really well. They offer a variety of things to kind of keep you busy, and a variety of things at age-appropriate levels too. So there's a lot of things for the younger kids. There's a few things for the teenagers and things like that to do. And there's obviously adult sports and adult activities that you can do too. And there's a lot of stuff that if we were living in the U.S., we wouldn't be able to do. Like, for instance, the golf course. We have a 9-hole golf course here, and golf is really expensive, And I'm terrible at golf, but I got the membership, and I go out to the golf course, and me and my friends, me and a few guys go out there, and we hit some balls around, and we're all terrible, but it's inexpensive enough that we could do it here, whereas in the U.S. we wouldn't be able to do something like that. So there's opportunities to do things like that, and to kind of learn new things and learn new sports, and we kind of take advantage of that.
That's really interesting. Do you feel so? The way you're saying that, do you feel as though the school is kind of trying to catch up to what the community does as a whole, and that's what your new position is serving as, to try to kind of bring that more of a community sense into the school?
I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to, because they've always had like a really big activities program, and then last year they didn't have it because of COVID. But there's been a lot of kids who are involved in a lot of things, but there hasn't been sort of a direction, or what I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it more supportive of what the secondary school is doing and what they're doing academically in the classroom. So instead of just like a hodgepodge of all kinds of different activities, they want to kind of focus them in, STEM, in different categories like STEM or youth sports, or creative outlets like art and choir and things like that. But they're trying to focus them a little bit more and categorize them so that they can support what's going on in the classroom and then lead them into activities later on in life. So that when they get in secondary school, they've had sort of an introduction to some of these activities, and then hopefully after that, they will have had that experience and they'll have the exposure to be able to continue that later on in life. And then another thing that I'm going to be trying to do is kind of connect it to the opportunities in the community, right? So there's all kinds of different clubs, there's all kinds of different opportunities and courts and fields and all kinds of stuff around here. And so I would like to connect some of the after-school activities with some of the community opportunities. So when they leave school, when they leave, our campus, they can still go and play tennis, or they can still go and play golf, or go and play rugby, or go and play, something else out into the community because they're familiar with it and they've been exposed to it.
That's great. I think it's something that you see regardless of where the school is. It's about trying to connect them to the community. Bringing in community partners into activities is so important for students to see. So I want to transition a little bit. I want to learn more about Mr. Rodriguez. What does your class look like? How would your kids describe gym class with Mr. Rodriguez? What do you think maybe sets you apart that's a little bit different than other gym teachers do? What does that class dynamic look like?
Well, like I said before, I try my best to kind of see things through the perspective or through the lens of my students, and I try to offer that in my class. So for the last few years, we've been me and Andy and a couple other teachers here have been really into the idea of meaningful PE, and with that idea, we start with the base philosophy of constructivism and social constructivism, and the idea that the students are the ones who are creating knowledge for themselves, and the students are the ones who are experiencing, reflecting, and creating meaningful experiences for themselves. So it's not us sort of filling an empty vessel. It's them experiencing these things and through reflection, making meaning of them. And that's how we all. So I basically my philosophy is that that's how we all kind of go through life, right? That we have to create meaning of the things around us. And so physical education is a great opportunity for students to understand the world through their physical being, and even our youngest learners, and even more so, our youngest learners are very tactile and they're very physical, and they learn how to navigate the world with their body first. So before they can think of abstract thoughts, and they have the the ability to think abstractly, they experience the world through their body, right? And they communicate knowledge through their actions. And so in my class, what I try to do is I try to kind of honor that. So lots of choices, giving kids lots of opportunities to express themselves in different ways. And I think it's really important to also kind of make sure that they are feeling comfortable and safe and having fun in my class. So sometimes I'll do check-ins and things like that, emotional type check-ins, to make sure that the kids are experiencing physical education in a positive way. Because I know sometimes, even the smallest things, especially for our younger kids, or even the smallest things can set them can set them up for, not necessarily for failure, but like to experience something in a negative way. And sometimes you just have to have a conversation with that student or help them get through that in order for them to experience your class in a positive way, because those can affect them in the long term, and they wouldn't even know it, right? Because if you're thinking about them creating that knowledge for themselves, the environment and that social interaction with the students around them is going to be a big part of that. So instead of coming into the gym thinking negatively, if they form a positive connotation with physical activity and the gym space and the person that's in that gym space, then they're more likely to have a positive association with physical activity and hopefully take that with them as they mature and as they grow older. So I mean, it like specifically what I tried to do with my kindergartners, we would always have some sort of fun activity coming into the gym. So we'd have what I call a magic door, and I kind of got that from Jill Connell. But we'd have some way of entering the gym, whether it be through a tunnel or through something on the door, streamers or something like that, or maybe they'd hop in on a trampoline or something like that. So everybody's entering in a fun way, and so it's already kind of setting the tone. And then, during COVID, everybody had like a spot, and so everybody would go to like their spot, and they could choose wherever they wanted to. That's another big part of what I try to do. I give them a lot of choice, and I give them a lot of autonomy to kind of feel free and be a part of that space, so they can own that space. And then what I try to do with my activities, we'll usually have some sort of fun warm up, and sometimes that'll be differentiated as well, so they can choose how they want to warm up. And then I would always have some sort of choice for them to enter into an activity at their level. So if we had 4 different options, they could choose option number 1, which is easiest, or option number 2, which is harder, and gradually getting harder, and in that kind of respect. And then you also want to give the kids some sort of time to reflect on their experience. And so that could be as easy as a walk and talk, just walking around the gym, talking to a friend, or they could actually, we did several self-assessments where they would have a green dot or a red dot, and they could tell us how they feel that they did for that particular activity. So things like that. So there's always a reflection time at the end, so the kids can kind of make sense of what they just experienced. So that's kind of in a general way what the class would look like, but obviously depending on the unit, depending on the time, depending on the activity, it would be, it would change up from time to time.
The magic door entrance, I really like that. What difference do you see? I'm going to make an assumption that you weren't using that from the very first day you started teaching. So what difference did you see by just implementing that idea of the magic door into your classroom in terms of their attitude and their approach to the rest of the class?
Yeah, so students are typically always excited to go to physical education class because it's a time of the day where they can just kind of be free and be physical. But with that specific one, the magic door, I feel like the kids really were excited to walk through the door, and they were always excited to see what new magic door there would be. So we change it up every week, right? So we see our kids twice a week, and we would change it up from week to week. And so a lot of times they were excited to come and see what was new. Are we going to be jumping on a trampoline? Are we going to be doing rolling down a mat? Are we going to, like, what is it, what's going to happen? And so, yeah, it kind of sets a tone. It kind of sets a tone that this is a place that you can have fun and you can be loose and you can have fun in this place, right? And then I would always do it first. So I kind of lead them through it. And if they see me, I'm 6'1", pretty tall guy, especially if you're thinking about kindergartners, and I'm doing a forward roll through a tunnel, down a mat. It's like, oh, well, that's cool. It gives them permission to be a little bit silly as well. And so, I think for the most part, it kind of sets a tone and says, this is a place where it's okay to be a little bit silly and you can have fun and you can be a little bit physical and it's okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was, as a fifth grade teacher, the start of the day for me, kids are showing up for the day and they spend the whole day with me. And for a large majority of my time in fifth grade, I use that as a time to target specific activities that we would typically run out of time to do. One was really strongly connected to our math curriculum. And I'm a part of a group that runs an event called STEM Camp EDU, and it's a professional development event for teachers, and we started every day off clapping, yelling, screaming, having fun, doing something really exciting. And the fourth year that we ran this event, it hit me, why does my class not look like this every morning at 8:30 a.m. when kids are showing up? And so I threw away all of those very regimented activities that I had the kids do, and it was completely choice based. And I explained to the kids, and it takes coaching, and I'm sure you see the same thing, like someone might be a little too dangerous or something with one of the magic doors, and it takes critiquing and correcting. But I explained to my students, like, I want the morning to be your time. I'm going to have things available that are fun that we will do later in the year or that we've done previously in the year that you can choose to do. But you just have to make a choice of what you want to do, and you have to have a reason. So if I walk up to you and say, Bobby, why are you just sitting here and reading? And you respond and say, Mr. Herman, I really don't owe you any work, and I'm kind of tired. I just want to relax. Great. That's a fantastic choice. Or if I see you, playing with the robots that we use for our coding activities, and I know you owe me 10 things, like, that might not be a good choice either. So not only the fun aspect, but the purpose of making meaningful decisions. And so maybe I should have, but I never heard the idea of the magic door. I really like that idea. As moving in the fourth and fifth, will you still use it, even though they're older and they're cooler as fourth and fifth graders?
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, everybody likes to have fun, I think people take themselves too seriously sometimes, and even as adults, like, we need permission to have fun, and so that's the kind of atmosphere that I want in my class. I want even my fifth grade students to think, like, this is a place where we can relax and we can have fun, and we don't have to wear our masks, or, well, I mean, literally they have to wear masks, but we don't have to wear our figurative masks anymore and try to put on a show. Like, we can have fun, and sometimes I need permission to do that,
Absolutely. How do you feel your class serves as an opportunity to maybe connect with students on a more social or emotional level that maybe a classroom teacher doesn't have the opportunity to do? Or what are things that you specifically do that allow you to really connect and bond with students to benefit your classroom?
Yeah, I think that's really important, like building those relationships with kids, and a part of the idea of meaningful PE and having a sort of a democratic classroom, it is the idea of having the kids have input into pretty much everything that goes on, from co-constructed curriculum to assessment to success criteria to the learning environment, to decorating it with the way, either the products of what they've done or the way they want it to look. So all that the students have influence in and have input in. And so when you create an environment that is represents your students a little bit more, it's easier to create that bond with them, or to develop that relationship with them, because now they feel like they're a part of it. There's some buy-in. There's they know that you're listening to them, and there's that sort of mutual respect that's going on. So I'm going to respect you as a person. I want you to respect me as a person, and then that's where the relationship starts naturally and authentically forming. And I think that's really important with the things that you display, and the things that you model, and the things that you do that's not necessarily explicit. I think kids are very keen to pick up on those things, and I think those things are really important. And then, like we talked about before the show, like genuinely being interested in what they have to say and what they have to offer, and treating them like they have something to offer, because it's one of the great things about doing a podcast and talking to people from all over the world, is that you realize that everybody has a story, everybody has something to offer, and you can learn from absolutely everybody that you interact with. And the kids, when they have that feeling, I feel like they are more open to those experiences, and more open to creating a relationship with you. And I think that's how you start it up.
You described that really well, because I feel like that's sometimes difficult for teachers to kind of put their thumb on, especially the teachers that just from the beginning of their career, they've just connected with kids. They're really good at connecting, because I think it, like you said, it has to be genuine. And I think a lot of times it happens so easily for so many because they are genuine. You talked a lot about choice, a democratic classroom, bringing in their input into your class. So let's say we're talking with a teacher that feels they have a really strong connection to students on a relationship basis. They establish that rapport well, there's mutual respect, but they're struggling to design lessons that they feel brings input in from the students. It's still very teacher directed. What are some simple tips or strategies you would have to help a teacher harness that great relationship that they have, but take it a step further where they are running a classroom that's a little bit more democratic?
So I think, so specifically to PE, and I know there's ways of doing this in the classroom as well, but obviously I'm more familiar with PE. There are certain models, or certain physical education models that lend themselves better to creating that sort of democratic classroom. So I'm thinking of like cooperative learning, and there's some really great ways that the teacher can be sort of that facilitator and sit back and let the students do most of that heavy lifting, and have them learning from each other. An example of that is I was doing a dance unit, and it's always an awkward unit for me. I'm not like a dancer. I'm not, and the kids don't like that either. Especially like my fifth grade students in Houston, they weren't excited about doing a dance unit. You'd have a handful of them that were like, yeah, I love to dance, and the rest of them are just kind of like, oh, it's kind of awkward. They're getting to that stage where they're very aware of their awkwardness and what people think about them, and so they don't want to do it. And I had just gone to the conference in Asheville that Artie runs, and it's totally, I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, it's a great conference that Artie Camilla used to run in Asheville and North Carolina. And I saw a presentation by Ash Casey from England, and he was doing cooperative learning, and he was describing how the jigsaw method of cooperative learning can do just that, like put the students in control of their learning, and put the students in a position where they are the ones that are creating and teaching and demonstrating. And so I thought that would be perfect for my dance unit, and I did that. So I had the kids basically choreograph a dance routine that they created, and they taught each other, and then and then they performed it. And I was just facilitating. I was sitting back. I was helping, where I needed to help. But they were doing all the heavy lifting. And so in the Jigsaw method of cooperative learning, there's an expert group and there's a home group. And so everybody gets in their home groups, and then you divide the home group into expert groups. And the expert groups are the ones who create the activity. Then they come back to the home groups, and then they teach it. And then everybody does it. So it was awesome. It was such a shift in the way I used to teach, and that was very, teacher directed. And it was all the students, and there was so much buy-in. It was 100% participation, and they were so excited about the end product that they wanted me to record it and send it to their teachers and their parents. And this was every class too. They were just like so excited to do it, and so excited to once they got into it, I should say that, because there was some resistance at first. Because I remember specifically there was one student that said, "Can't you just show us what to do? Can't you just tell me what to do and I'll do it?" And I was like, no. You guys are doing it. You guys are doing all of it. This is all you. This is not me. This is not, it has nothing to do with me. This is what you guys are doing. And it took a while for a few of the kids to kind of understand that, because I think they learn quickly, like, school is, I sit, you tell me, and I do. But once they got it, they were so proud of that end result. Like I said, they wanted me to share it for them. So yeah, I think those are powerful, like, moments and examples of students figuring those things out for themselves, and there's plenty of models that are out there that you could use in your classroom to help you facilitate those things. But I think for the most part, it's sort of a mindset, and you have to shift your mindset from thinking it's my responsibility to teach these kids to it's my responsibility to create an environment where the students are free enough, have the autonomy, and have the motivation and desire to learn from each other and teach each other. So it's less about me and it's more about them.
Yeah, and I think the way you just put that, I think a struggle for so many teachers to reach that mindset is, and you just said about the motivation to do so. I think a lot of teachers will observe or feel that their students are very unmotivated to do work, but a lot of that lack of motivation, I think, comes from the atmosphere that they're learning in. They're learning in the atmosphere where they're waiting for the teacher to tell me what to do. They don't care about doing it, so the motivation to do well or to do so isn't there. And when you shift it, I've had the same exact comments of students to me of, can't you just tell me what to do and I'll do it? But when you change that mindset and you get your students to change their mindset, like you said, the results are incredible. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you had a unit where there was lack of motivation, there was lack of buy-in, so it was a great place to try it. And I'm guessing you didn't care as much about what types of dances they did, more of just being a participant in dancing. And I'm sure there were some specific standards in there that or goals or things that you wanted them to accomplish. But, that was a time where I was able to find ways to be more democratic and more choice-based and student-led. When I would look at a set of standards that I was supposed to cover, and I think I've mentioned this on a show before, I had a unit where I had to teach the kids about the Earth's biomes. And they needed to understand what weather was and what climate was and what adaptations were and how those environmental factors created those adaptations. But when the resources were passed to me, there was PowerPoint slide decks prepared of specific animals, specific plants from each biome. And I thought to myself, well, why do those animals and plants matter? They don't. I don't care what animal and plant they want to research. I just want them to understand the adaptations. And so I turned it to very choice-based. They made documentaries like they were Steve Irwin as the end result. And, they taught each other. They taught each other through the videos that they were making. And they were so much more motivated by it. And they were, frankly, much more involved in the content because they were leading it. And I kind of saw a similar thing where I didn't so much care about exactly what they accomplished or what they learned, but the major concepts were kind of woven throughout.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by you kind of have to let go of that, and you kind of have to shift your mindset. And I think, for me anyway, I was a product of that educational system that said, this is right and this is wrong, and there was no wiggle room. And I think there are some instances where, 1 + 1 = 2, and 1 + 1 will always equal 2. But there's other areas where you can have a little bit more autonomy, and it doesn't have to be a right or wrong answer. And we have to be willing enough as teachers to allow for that, right? And allow the students to bring in their expertise and their knowledge, and genuinely value that. Because if somebody's coming at you with a different perspective, and they have, in my situation, a different dance move that wasn't part of the PowerPoint slide or whatever, I can't say that that's wrong. That's something that I didn't think about, and yeah, that could be as valuable to you as it would be to somebody else, and so that's part of it too. That relevant learning experience, that personally relevant learning experience, I think is really powerful too. And when we can share our relevance and our significance and what we find meaningful with somebody else, then that's huge. I think that's like a win-win for everybody, because now I'm learning from you, you're learning from me, and we're learning to value each other. And that's what I think sometimes is missing so much in some of the ideas of curriculum, where there is a right and wrong answer, because now we're only valuing what that answer is rather than each other. And I think, again, this kind of shifts it, where we're more concerned with the value of each other and what we can bring to the table, and truly valuing that inclusivity and diversity, and it not being an artificial way of valuing those things. Does that make sense? And I think that's really important. We're valuing each other's humanity rather than what the book says is right or wrong.
Absolutely. And the value of the humanity in each other is most important. But even still, there were times where we were working on projects where I would tell the students, you don't have to be the expert of all these pieces. Feel free to collaborate with each other. If we were working on a project that required a piece of art, or maybe they were even writing picture books, I would say, if you want to get somebody else to illustrate for you, that's fine, because go to the library and you'll see half of the book said illustrated by. And so, lean on a friend in the class that is a great artist, because not only did I want them collaborating in that manner, having the mindset of asking for help from others, but in that situation specifically, and others that I could speak to, a lot of times you can highlight a student that typically doesn't get highlighted. The really great artist in the class might not be the one that always shines in math and science and social studies. And so to give that kind of voice to those others, I think is so important. So we've kind of been circling around the topics of specific lessons and projects. So I want to try to hit you for one more with our lesson lens part of the show. And so we'll kind of dive deep into a specific activity that you've done with your kids. So the first question, is it a unit overview, a long-term project, or a single lesson?
So the one I had in mind was a unit. We did a wheels unit in kindergarten last year.
Perfect. That sounds really interesting. So you mentioned the grade level. Subject area we know is phys ed, and the unit is the wheels. Does the specific time of year matter, like having them earlier in the year or having them developed later in the year with the way your class runs?
Yeah, well, we wanted to wait till they were a little older to do it. So we waited till the end of the year.
Okay.
So it was kind of later spring.
Okay. And
but in Saudi Arabia, it's like hot and like really hot. So so that was something that we had to take into consideration too.
I can only imagine. So what were the specific objectives of the lesson?
So, so one of the objectives was, let's see, I got it written down here. Acting upon instruction and being spatially aware, helping to become safe. And so, with that objective, we wanted them to understand that safety was sort of the priority in this unit, and being spatially aware and being aware of the people around you and the things around you was super important. So with that, we kind of unpacked that objective a little bit, and we broke it down into following directions, identifying signs, being safe, and one of our developmental continuum objectives was to be able to pedal a tricycle by the end of K3, so the end of kindergarten. And so what we did with that also with those objectives is we had those in mind, but we took the feedback of our students to sort of unpack the idea of being safe and what they thought was important in being safe. And so when we talked about riding our bikes or riding our bikes in the community, what was important, and they said knowing the street signs, knowing how to signal, and then being to identify those, and then being able to act that out. And so that was a little bit further on how we unpack that using student voice to unpack it.
That's really neat. What would you speak to in terms of what the students are actively doing during these lessons? Anything specific that you want to highlight?
So, so I guess basically what they were doing was we created a course inside of our gym, and then they were able to choose which vehicle they wanted to practice on. So we had sit-down scooters, and that was kind of level 1, and then we had push scooters where you would kind of balance and push with one foot. That was sort of level 2. Then we had tricycles, level 3, and then we had like push balance bikes where you kind of sit there. They don't have pedals, but you kind of sit and balance, and then you can kind of push yourself off. And so the students would choose. So we'd either have 2 or 3 rounds where they would be either riding their bikes around. And then around the gym, we had different street signs like stop signs, crosswalks, things like that. And then the other half of the class was in sort of the middle of the gym, and they were practicing different balancing activities. So, balance beam, balancing a beanbag on their head while they walk on the balance beam, things like that. We tried to mix it up so the kids were having fun while they were inside. So they would do that for a song or two, and then they would switch. So the inside group would then get a chance to choose one of the bikes or whatever level they wanted, and then the riders would come back in. And then so after everybody did a round, we would do sort of like a self-assessment to see how they were doing with different aspects of the activity. So were they being safe? They would put either a green or a red dot on a big poster board. What was the other thing? I'm kind of forgetting some of the assessments that we did. Their balance, things like that. So they would self-assess, based on different criteria that they would kind of help inform. And we'd have big posters with all their names on it, and they can put their stickers. And that was sort of like an ongoing assessment too. So that was something that we could always kind of refer back to. So if a student was being unsafe, and they were being honest about it, and they gave themselves a red sticker or whatever that would be, the next time we could have a conversation with that student and say, okay, last time you were being a little unsafe, maybe we could work on that, and typically that would, make a difference.
Excellent. What was your role during the lesson to ensure the student's success?
So my role in that particular unit was really the role of sort of like a facilitator. So I would collect data on the self-assessment. I would be observing. I would sort of offer one-on-one help if somebody needed help. So with activities like that, it kind of frees you up to be able to offer that one-on-one help. It was a kindergarten unit, so sometimes a kindergartner, well, really all our students, they want to be seen, they want to be identified, they want to be, they want want to be noticed, and so it frees you up to be able to do those types of things as well. Building relationships again is huge. So this is an opportunity also when students are finding their just right challenge and they're active and they're doing their thing, to be able to go to one student and have a conversation with them. Part of our summative assessment was to have many sort of one-on-one interviews with the students, and so that took place across 3 weeks. So yeah, activities like that gave us opportunities to be able to have a conversation with the students and see what they're learning, what they're actually learning in their own words, or their own ability to demonstrate some of their learning and some of the process that they've achieved at that point. So yeah, that was basically my role during that unit.
Excellent. I find the more you make your learning student centered and you pull yourself out of the equation, you actually pull yourself more into the equation on that individual student basis, like you're saying. So if you facilitate this lesson again, I know you're moving out of kindergarten, but if you were to, or you were going to help the next teacher run this same unit, what advice would you have for yourself or for that teacher that's going to do it the next time?
So for this unit, I wanted to have more outdoor components, but because it was later on in the spring, it was really hot, and so it was harder for us to be able to go outside because it's hot. It gets really, really hot, and it's really, really humid where we are because we're right next to the Red Sea. So I would do it a little bit earlier. I would do it like the winter here is absolutely gorgeous. It's really, really nice up until about spring break, and then after spring break, it starts getting pretty warm. So I would do it earlier so that we could incorporate some more of those outdoor components. And I would probably, this was a new unit for us, and so we didn't have much connection with the classroom teachers, and typically we try to have a pretty good connection of what's going on in the classroom. We try to at least have different aspects of our IB planner that align with what's going on in the classroom. So I would definitely do that a little bit more, as align some of the concepts that we're teaching in PE with some of the concepts that they're learning in the classroom.
That's great. So our last segment of the show is called the exit ticket. Same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. Question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
I would say, that mutual respect is huge, and the last couple of years I've had some training in positive discipline, and they talk about the students' need to feel to have a sense of significance, and I think that's huge. I think it's really important to have the mutual respect for your students, and give them an opportunity to have some meaningful experience in your classroom and have some significance.
I completely agree. The piece of respect I've always found so important. I think it's, in general in life, I think it's so important to really desire to earn someone's respect and to pass that back to them in a mutual manner if it fits. And we had a guest recently her name is Kara. She teaches high school art. And she said, she didn't want her students to respect her because she was the teacher. She wanted them to respect her as a person. And there's a difference between demanding respect and earning respect. And that mutual piece, like you're saying, is so important. What's the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
So this is it's a story I've told on my podcast a couple times, but it was really like a punch in the gut, right? So my first year here, so again, I'm teaching kindergarten. I'm really not used to teaching kindergarten, but it's like, okay, I'm in this position. I'm trying to make the most of it. And even though I have always tried to have a student-centered approach and not talk too much, I've tried to get to the activities really quickly. in this particular case, for whatever reason, I felt like I had to tell the kids, what my expectations were. Be careful about this. Pay attention to this. So I was talking a little more than I should. And this one little girl, I'm talking in the middle of my sentence. She goes, boring. And I was just like, what? Like, she's 5 years old, And I kind of sat back, and I thought, I am being kind of boring, I'm talking and talking and talking to these 5-year-olds. They don't want to hear me. They just want to get to the activity. Nobody was listening, And this one little girl had the courage enough to tell me, like, you're talking way too much. This is too much. And it was a real big learning experience for me, right? And I thought, okay, I can get mad, and I can be like, that's disrespectful. You shouldn't disrespect me. Blah, 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 blah. Or I can listen and say, you know what, I am being boring. Let's get to the activity. And so, from that point on, I made it a point to really, and I talked to my pedagogical coordinator, who I told you about before, and I had him start timing me and give me feedback on how long I was talking. And I forced myself to kind of scaffold the activities so that the learning can be going on through the activity rather than me verbalizing the activity or verbalizing the learning. And it's a lot better for the kids. It's a lot better for me and the environment. And that, like I said, that was a huge learning experience for me, where it was like, yeah, I'm not taking your, I'm not taking into account your developmental stage. I'm just kind of talking because I feel like I should tell you these things. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I had to shift a little bit there.
I'm pretty sure that's advice that every teacher could use from time to time. We so often blame students for not following directions, not paying attention, so many things. But if we reflected as humbly as you did, we might realize a lot of that falls on us. If you're doing a long-term project, you can't give directions on step 1 through 10, because only step 1 is relevant. So the rest need to wait, whether it be through a mini lesson, a screencast, whatever, to let the students just pay attention to what's relevant. And everyone in general, we lose focus on the person talking after a while, unless you're in a small conversation or you are just really, really engaged by like a keynote speaker that's doing a fantastic job. It's just hard to stay focused unless you're genuinely really interested in the topic, which, newsflash for most educators, most kids are not genuinely interested in the concepts that we're teaching. So it's our job to grasp and maintain that interest. So the school year goes in waves. It's very stressful, typically circling around report cards and conferences and those things that seem to stack up on us as teachers. So when we're in that moment struggling, what is something that you would want to say to every educator to help them power up?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have any words of wisdom there. I don't know. I guess I would say, I always try to keep things in perspective, and I think that's really important. And I don't know. I feel like I try to focus on the things that are most important, and the things that are not that important, or a little bit trivial, or a little bit don't matter as much. I don't put too much effort into, right? So there I feel and this is probably bad to say, but I feel like there's some places where you can cut some corners and be okay, and then there's other places that demand your 100% focus. And I think it's important to identify those and be able to be present and be 100% when it's needed, and then be able to prioritize down some of those things that don't need your whole attention.
I completely agree, and I actually really like that advice of maintaining perspective, because I will see teachers maybe the next day, maybe during the same time that they're stressed out about these things that, pile up in the same time, in the time span, and then they're spending hours putting this little, detail on a lesson that frankly is not going to make an impact on students. Like, maybe something as simple as like a label they're going to put on every piece of candy before a standardized test. Like, it's nice to do that, but it's just as nice to just say to the kids before they take the test, hey, I believe in you. Here's a piece of candy. Like, do your best. And you just saved yourself 2 hours instead of printing the labels and sticking them on. So maintaining that perspective, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
So the last.
Sorry. I was just going to say, it's sort of that 80-20 rule too, right? Where it's like, and I don't know the exact.
I think we spend
exactly
80%, like 80% of our time on stuff that doesn't matter, and 20% on what truly matters, that kind of stuff.
Right, and then the 20% is really what pays dividends. Like that there's that 20% that really pays dividends, and that's the stuff that you need to spend 100% of your attention on. And then there's that other stuff that it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of busy work, and it's not really going to make a difference. And I think it's important to be able to identify and differentiate between the two.
Absolutely. So the last question is very easy, but it might be a long one because I know you do a lot. How can our audience connect with you, follow you, find out more about you? Please tell us all the places that they can continue to listen and learn from you.
Well, I'll keep it short. So Twitter is probably the best place, although I'm in a weird place right now, I think, with social media. I kind of love it and hate it. So, but Twitter, my Twitter handle is @PhysEdNow. Let's see. I have a podcast called the Global Phys Ed Voxcast, and my website is globalphysed.net, so people can check that out too, and hit me up there if they wanna connect with me. And I guess we could just kind of leave it at that. Yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter, and I typically respond.
Absolutely. That's how I landed you on this podcast. You responded to us on Twitter, so we appreciate that. This is Jorge. This has been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Really enjoyed learning about your experience of making a big move, and the value you've gotten out of that, and just the value you bring to your students on a daily basis. So we really appreciate it. Everything that was shared today, some of the names, some of the topics, as well as all the links to social media at the podcast and his website, will all be found on our website, which can be searched at poweredup.com/show36. And we'll have links to everything there. As always, thank you all for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you are using, as well as YouTube. And please share this with educators. We really want the messages that we're hearing, the conversations that we're engaging in. We want as many teachers as possible to hear that, so they can learn, grow, and feel powered up by what they're hearing from their colleagues from across the country and across the world. And Jorge, you're actually my first official guest outside of the United States. So that's a big honor, possibly. But thanks again for meeting up with us, and we wish everyone the best. And this is usually the part of the show where Matt takes over to close us down. But as always, we hope we left you feeling powered up. And Jorge, have a fantastic day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.